Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. With host and founder, Richard Case, and co-host and retreat leader, Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend in the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is End Times Friday, and we have very special guests from Israel, and we have an update from Israel, and now our regulars, and you guys all know him. We have Denny Weinberg, who's here from California, and friends of these guys, and we have Eric. Eric, where are you, in Jerusalem or in Tel Aviv?
I'm in Jerusalem.
Okay, and then Ephraim, you're in Jerusalem as well, right?
Yeah, also Jerusalem.
Yep. So we have Rabbi Ephraim, and Eric, and we're going to just spend this session and the next session kind of catching up. Since the last time we talked to them, it's just lots and lots of activity, and we got lots of questions. So I know, Denny, with you wanted to kind of introduce it by, since there's high holidays, we'd love to understand those a little bit.
Yeah, it's, we refer to these in America, and I assume in Israel as well, as the high holy days. And people probably know that in the religion of Judaism, these festivals, which occur every year, and they go all the way back to the earliest parts of the Bible, that these are really, really important. And so I just thought it would be interesting, because this last couple of weeks and the weeks looking forward contain a cluster of these, first from Ephraim, Rabbi Ephraim, to get sort of a spiritual, sort of background on what these celebrations and feasts are about. And then also, in the context of sort of the modern world from Israel, I think it would be very, very informative.
Okay, is that my cue?
It is.
Okay. So there's actually three holidays that are going on, three high holidays that are happening all at this time. We're about to enter the third. Technically, there's actually a fourth at the end, but the first one is Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year. And all Jewish holidays are not just commemorative of an event. They're meant to capture some sort of a spiritual value. And the idea is that we are supposed to grab onto that and trying to grow personally in the particular aspect of that holiday. So Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment. According to Jewish tradition, the whole world, every human being comes before God. God checks us out, all our actions, our behaviors from the past year. And he basically decides, based on that, on our budget for the coming year. What do we need? What do we need to reach our potential this year? Do we need to get sick? Do we need to have a lot of money? Do we need a little money? Do we need what's going to happen in relationships, wars, etc.? All that basically gets decided based on what does the world really need to reach its potential, and me personally. So it's a very awesome day. There's fear, there's joy, there's trust in God. It's a very intense day where we spend a lot of the time in the synagogue praying, with the focus on trying to focus on what do we really want to be? What do we want our goal in life to be? Where do we want to get to? Where have we fallen short of our aspirations for ourselves? That's followed up by Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And that is a day that God washes away our sins, our mistakes, and it's a day to really have a fresh and clean start. And repentance in Judaism only works when you really sincerely regret the mistakes that you've made in the past. It just doesn't roll off, but God is waiting for us to really regret and to start a new path forward. So it gives us an opportunity to just clean ourselves out, start fresh. It's sort of like a rebirth every year. And then once we're all, now our values are set, our goals are set, we're starting a new fresh, we're now able to really live in the presence of God in a healthy way, in a clean way, in a beautiful way. So 5 days after Yom Kippur comes the the holiday of Sukkot in Hebrew, or the Feast of the Tabernacles, which is actually we leave our houses and we go and live outside in huts that we build for ourselves. They have to be temporary dwellings. And we live out there. We eat all our meals there. We hang out there. We sleep there, weather permitting. And it's a beautiful, beautiful holiday, and it lasts for a whole week. And it's basically the holiday of joy. And it's the joy of being in God's presence and living with God and having trust in God, and realizing that the material things in life are really not what gives us happiness. It's the spiritual things, the simple things. We don't need our houses and our cars and our fancy art or anything like that. It's just being, and being with our families and being with God and being alive. And we focus on those basic things that give us life. It also is meant to commemorate we dwelt in those temporary dwellings when God took us out of Egypt. After our years of slavery in Egypt, when we spent 40 years in the desert, we were living in these temporary dwellings. So it's also a remembrance of those days in the desert. And that culminates in the final day, which is Simchat Torah, which is a day of celebration and dancing, when we complete the reading of the Bible. The Bible is read every week in synagogues, and at the end of a year, we complete the reading of the 5 books of Moses. And that's basically, you celebrate by dancing and singing, usually in the synagogue, the whole day long, and celebrating our love for the Bible, its values, the gift that God gave us. And that's going to be a tough one this year, because that's the day that October 7th happened on last year. The Hamas chose that holiday to do their awful attack on one of our most joyous holidays. So it's going to be a bit rough for Israelis this year to celebrate on that day in the way that we usually do.
Yes. Yeah. Is the with those celebrations and high holidays, is most of the citizens of Israel celebrate those, or are they just a portion? Or
good question. Well, in Israel, like, these are the national holidays, so it's sort of similar to Christmas and Easter. Everybody has them to some degree. They happen. Nobody's working. People go, but they celebrate them in different ways. People that are more observant religiously will spend, for example, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the synagogue praying. Whereas people who are less observant religiously will do something else, but they're almost all recognizing the holiday. They're getting together with their families for festive meals. A huge percentage of Israel fasts on Yom Kippur, even if they're not observant at all. It really strikes a very, very core bone in the Jewish soul. So a huge number of people, even very non-religious people, will fast for the whole day, 25 hours. And so, it's a part of, and Sukkot, basically, if you walk around the city today, yesterday, the whole week, everybody is busy buying, all the palm fronds and the little yellow etrog, which looks like a lemon, and all the, the leaves to cover their sukkah. The whole country is busy with the holidays. So to one extent or another, everybody's involved.
If I might be able to expand on what Brian's been saying, I'll expand mostly on how it's celebrated here in Israel. So, as your viewers might know, there are 2, like, I wouldn't say types of Jews, but Jews are sort of descended from 2 different areas. Some are called Sephardim, and the Hebrew word for Spain is Sfard. These are descendants that came through the Spanish and Spanish Inquisition, went into the Ottoman Empire, and mostly occupied living in areas of the Middle East, okay, including parts of Greece. And then the others are the Ashkenazim, who are descended mostly from Jews who emigrated to parts of what is now Germany, and then to large parts of Europe. The actual majority of the Jews living in Israel today are Sephardim, that is, descendants of those from Spain that went into parts of the Ottoman Empire. They have slightly different ways to celebrate. I wouldn't say celebrating, because it's not really a celebration prior to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but there's a period of what are called the Salichot, where you're praying for all the terrible things you did to people, or or you did before God during the year previous. And the Sephardim will start saying these Slichot prayers roughly 30 days before Yom Kippur, I believe it is, isn't it, Ephraim? 30, I think it's 30 days.
Or Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, or before Rosh Hashanah. And then the Ashkenazim will say these prayers between roughly Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, a little bit shorter. Okay, it culminates, and I have this post I do, not every night, but close to it. But on right before Yom Kippur, a close friend of mine, one of my best friends here in Israel, happened to be at the Western Wall the night before Yom Kippur, and there had to be easily 100,000 people crowded. You couldn't move, and they were all singing in unison the prayers of Slichot, and it just it sends goosebumps.
Even at 4 o'clock in the morning.
That's right. It's an amazing sight, an amazing experience. I've done something similar personally. I'm a Kohen, so I've done it's called the Birkat Kohanim, which is done twice a year at the Western Wall Plaza. And once again, you're in a crowd of 100,000 people all praying in unison. And it's truly, even for someone like me who isn't tremendously observant, I don't fully observe all the laws to the extent that Ephraim does, but it's truly, it moves you.
Yes.
In many ways, in a very strong way. And then I'll also expand on some things Ephraim said regarding on the day of Yom Kippur, even those who are not observant, who do not go to synagogue and on a weekly basis or a daily basis, maybe don't keep kosher, the whole country stops. There is not a car driving in the street. There is not a restaurant, a cafe, not a store that is open. Everything is closed and shut. And it's to such an extent that for many of the kids in the country, it's a special day. Why? Because there are no cars in the street. It's totally safe to go on your tricycle or on your bicycle or on your scooter, not motorized, not electric, on a scooter, and your parents not worry about, are you going to get hit by a car or not? So the streets are filled with pedestrians and little kids, and it's something it's a really unique experience to experience. Yes. It's something totally different, and it's observed, as Ephraim said, not just by those who are very observant, but those who are not.
Yep. Wow. Is the with this year, and particularly this anniversary of the war, has the celebrations been different this year because of that?
There's a heaviness that hangs over the country. We're still living October 7th on a daily basis. So when we come up to holidays, especially holidays that call on us to reflect on the past year, which is what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are about, it's hard. So that's the focus. The focus everyone's talking about is like, boy, this was a tough year, tragic year. We hope next year is going to be a heck of a lot better and more hopeful. So it's definitely been a central part, and it's really difficult to express the joy and the happiness that usually accompanies these holidays. There's sort of a pall, that hangs over the country. And on a day-to-day basis, we're sort of used to it. But when it comes to the holidays, you feel it even more.
Yep. Yep.
So, yes.
And is the with the anniversary coming up, which is interesting because you celebrate the anniversary on the high holiday, which is because it happened on October 7th, right? So that day's already passed, but you think of the high holiday day. What's the tenor of the country about where things are relative to the fact that now it's a year later, and do they consider we're getting resolved? It's resolving. We're not resolving. where are they at? Eric, maybe you could start and give your
Yeah.
thought there.
So first of all, let me correct a misimpression. There were commemoration events that took place on October 7th in the communities that surround Gaza that were decimated on the 7th. Most of them held their own unique commemoration of the day in their own way. And the press was invited and visitors were invited, but they were really organized and run by the locals, not the government. The president of the country, Isaac Herzog, actually made a 3-day tour of all these communities during this period, where he met with a lot of the locals, and it was his way of paying a tribute to that day. The day of the 7th, on Israeli TV, on every single channel, for at least 48 hours, there was nonstop programming, interviewing the victims, the families of the victims, the families of the soldiers that were killed during the battle, the families of the hostages, and I mean, I didn't watch much of it. My wife watched a lot of it, and I don't know how she handled it. It's not an easy thing to watch so much in one day, because as Ephraim said, we are still living October 7th in the country. It's still a part of everybody's discussion every day, what's going on. And I'm not sure what event or what series of events are going to change that, but that's just where we are.
And what's the,
I would just add
go ahead. Yep.
I would just add in terms of the question that you asked, that I think that there's starting to be a sense of hopefulness that was not present. The battle in Gaza, the war in Gaza was really, really tough in the first half year and continuing. But now with we seem to be making solid progress. We seem determined to really finish and not give up until we finish. So there's a certain amount of hope and confidence that we will be able to put a lot of this behind us and be in a much more secure, safe position when we finish the war.
Oh,
but there's a very strong determination that we have to finish the war.
Yeah.
And that's what will give us confidence and security and safety and nothing else.
Yeah.
Ephraim, on that note, when you described Sukkot and this that this was about joy and trust, and you described some of the sort of emotions that holiday is around, does that intersect for most Israelis with this idea of hope that is emerging in the war or the wars? Or are these different kinds of worlds?
Does the holiday of Sukkot? Well, Sukkot hasn't started yet, so I can't really say. But I think there is a certain spirit in the air that comes with the holidays that I think is enhancing the sense of hope. But it's hope with a big question mark on it. It's not like, okay, we got this one. I think maybe we will get this. Maybe we'll get this right, despite all the world pressure and despite all the difficulties and all the sacrifices. I think maybe we will win this war enough that we can, live in security again.
I think a lot of the hope comes also from the there's a total restoration of faith in the IDF, in the army, that was lost on October 7th and for the few I would say weeks after. Okay, and this is in part because the after the 2006 war, which we call here the Second Lebanese War, we're now probably in what will probably be called the Third Lebanese War, and there was a lot of, after every war in this country, the army and to some extent the government goes through a complete reflection. It's like a post-mortem, if you might call it that in English. And sometimes there are official commissions that are appointed. Sometimes they're just internal reviews. And the army there was an official review of the 2006 war in Lebanon. And then the army did a total internal audit of and figured out what they needed to change. So when Hezbollah attacked unprovoked on October 8th by shelling Israel with their rockets, the army was completely prepared to take on Hezbollah. The October 7th Hamas attack, which caught the army, as you know, totally off guard. One can say maybe like 9/11, it was because of a lack of imagination. There are all kinds of reasons that will hopefully come out one day when we finally get a commission appointed to investigate what happened that led up to it and then the events afterwards. But in the meantime, we still don't know all the details. Some come out here and there on the press. But the successes of the IDF so far in the front in Lebanon have not only, I mean, we're used to being impressed by the army here in Israel, but they've impressed armies around the world, including the United States, of course.
Yeah.
And so this is giving the country a lot more hope, I believe, that, and in fact, I had reflected and thought that maybe the way to get our hostages back and to get an end to the Hamas war is by first winning in Lebanon and then forcing Hezbollah and Iran to put pressure on Hamas.
Yeah.
It's conjecture. And the fanatics in Hamas don't listen to logic. They have their own vision of the world. God forbid it ever happens. But maybe it could help.
Yeah.
So I think that's a reason also.
Yeah. When we, for our second session, we're going to get into what you are understanding about Hamas, Hezbollah, and then Iran, and we got to process what's happening in terms of discussion and what do you conjecture. But last time, Eric, we got a few more minutes here. You had ended our session with a statement about America and the position of America. If you could come back to that and revisit that of what is the view of America? We have an election coming up here in about, I guess it's now less than 3 weeks away. So
3 weeks from today.
So this is a big deal for us. So we'd love to hear your perspective, and then Ephraim, the same thing of what's your view of America, and you made some statements about the way that we were built and maybe the changes we have, but we'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
So I'll go first. So I'm a scientist by career and by choice, but I spent a lot of my life reading history. And I've read the autobiographies of all the founding fathers, the USA, more than one author. And so I think I understand very well how the country was formed and evolved. And the United States and the citizens of the United States should be thanking their stars or God every day of their lives for the incredible ingenuity and brilliance of the men and women who first set up the country, declared its independence, and structured the Constitution. It's truly one of the gifts to mankind, and I can't underestimate that, because until this point in time, everything were monarchies at the best case. Okay, and here comes the founders of the United States, and they structure a society based on the separation of church and state. Taking its values from the Bible, from the great philosophers of the age, to create a society that's amazing, truly to be admired by everybody in the world, and sitting abroad, I am an American. I'm an American Israeli, and it's just a shame to see some of the things that are going on. It's important for the free world, and I would say for the world in general, that the United States remain the leader of the free world. Because without that, I think we're going to be heading towards dark ages. Because the other forces that are not promoting freedoms of speech and freedom and human rights, and stands as an example for those institutions to the world, and to the contrary, have fascist regimes and dictatorships, lead to a very, very dark place for mankind and society. And for the U.S. And perhaps Israel's kind of a model. I'm just throwing this out. I don't know. We are capable, with the support of the United States, support diplomatically, and some financial support, because we can't bear all the costs of all the arms we need to protect ourselves, for which, of course, the country is incredibly grateful, and that never forgets. But rather than having to send its own forces, which is always a problem for the United States, especially into areas of the world it doesn't really understand well. Sending its forces into Iraq, it probably took 3 years for the U.S. Army to figure out how things work in Iraq. Before, and in the meantime, the Americans lost a lot of lives that are unnecessary. But we understand how this part of the world works, and we're capable of defending ourselves and defending the same values that we stand for alongside the United States. And so maybe this is an example that if the United States can replicate across other regions of the world, rather than having to always send U.S. forces to come to the defense of those who promote liberty and democracy, maybe you find states or nations where they're capable of defending themselves. They just need some help diplomatically and maybe with some arms. I don't know. Maybe Ukraine's another example. The situation in Ukraine is still unfolding. We'll have to wait and see how that unfolds. But for the United States to fully withdraw, pull back, and say, look, we're tired of being the leader of the free world. It's gonna. You can't isolate yourselves in the United States. If you do that, then it's going to lead to a very, very dark place for everybody, including the United States.
Yeah. Do you sense any shift with where, and we'll come back to this in session 2, about what you need to do to protect yourself and your citizens? Have you at least seen a shift of America's support of that, or is that something that's in potential danger of what you're trying to do?
I'm going to start by putting this in a little bit historical context. If you look at the Jewish people throughout the ages, it's always been a situation where we've had to juggle between superpowers. In the first temple period, it was between the Hittites and the Egyptians. And in the second temple period, it was between the Romans, and we had to figure out how do we live in a world with a superpower, and maintain the values of our society and so on and so forth. And so from our perspective, from a Jewish historical perspective, we're living in the period of what we would call our third Jewish Commonwealth. We don't have a third temple, maybe many, many years before we have one, if ever. But in the meantime, we're reestablishing our sovereignty in our ancient homeland, and so we've got to figure out how to navigate this. And every American administration is a little bit different. Okay, when President Biden came to Israel, that soon after October 7th, everybody I talked to, he connected to this country in a way that the country was used to seeing U.S. presidents connect. He came here emotional. He got it. He understood immediately, and he spoke from his heart. He really did. And he won over the whole country. He really did with what he did and what he said, and what he did afterwards with the Seventh Fleet and everything else. Then, of course, reality of elections sets in, and conflicting priorities sets in, and other agendas set in, and we conflicting messages. So one of the struggles of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government has been how to navigate all this, and yet fight the battles that Israeli people feel. It's interesting to note that I think many Americans hear in the American media about how terrible our prime minister is, and because he's not willing to reach a ceasefire right away, and he's not willing to do this or that the Biden administration is asking him to do. After all, the Biden administration has been helping so much, so why doesn't he agree to all this? But if you ask the Israelis, they're upset with Netanyahu just because he's listening too much to the Americans. Instead, many Israelis would have said, we should have been attacking Hezbollah months ago. Why did we wait so long?
Yeah.
Why did we wait 3 months to go into Rafah? What was going on during those 3 months? So when most Israelis, I wouldn't say all, but many, have the opposite view, and they're critical of the prime minister in the same, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And when there are demonstrations in the streets here in Israel against the prime minister, many of those people, not all, everyone's got their own reasons for disliking the prime minister. He's a very controversial prime minister, but those demonstrations are being used by people in the United States to argue. See, even the Israelis don't like the prime minister, but the Israelis don't like the prime minister for the opposite reasons that the Americans don't like. I think, and so I don't know how. I'm not sorry on that subject, but I did. It was related. I'm sorry. It was related to how the U.S. administration and so on has been supporting the country. But every Israeli knows how vital relationship is between us and the United States and how important it is. And it's based, in our views, on a relationship between two societies and two ways of life that are very similar, and two views on the world that are very similar. And there are passing prime ministers, there are passing presidents, and the relationship until now has done well under a variety of different presidents and prime ministers. And I certainly hope that it continues to do so in the future with whoever leads either of the countries.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all that input on both all these subjects. We'll continue in our next session. We're going to pick this up from here and then talk about what's next, because you have it at north, you have it at south, and you're getting it from the now the east. So our question is, how are you going to handle all that, and what do you expect to happen? So thank you so much for sharing that, and we're so excited to hear directly from somebody like the two of you that are inside the country and can express the truth so well. And we're so appreciative of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have questions from today's broadcast, be sure to send them to us at questions@abideministries.com, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.